Jake Morrison wiped the grease from his hands with a cleaning cloth that had seen better decades, the fluorescent lights of Repair Bay 7 casting harsh shadows across the cluttered workspace. Meridian Station never truly slept, but the night shift brought a different kind of clientele, the kind who paid in untraceable credits and didn't ask for receipts. He'd been fixing armor and weapons for 3 years now, ever since he traded his combat engineer insignia for a set of precision tools and a promise to himself that he'd never pick up another weapon. The bay doors hissed open with a sound like escaping steam, and Jake looked up from the plasma rifle he'd been recalibrating to see a figure silhouetted against the corridor's amber lighting. She moved with the careful gait of someone trying not to show how much pain they were in, her armor bearing the distinctive angular plates of Valkyrie craftsmanship. The blue-tinted skin visible through the gaps in her damaged gear marked her as one of the warrior caste, though Jake had never seen a Valkyrie look quite so defeated. "Bay's open," he called out, setting down his tools. "What kind of damage are we looking at?" She stepped into the light, and Jake felt his breath catch in his throat. Her armor told the story of a recent battle, plasma burns scored across the chest plate, impact damage along the left arm, and what looked like shrapnel marks peppering the shoulder guards. But it was her face that made him pause, the way she held herself with rigid dignity despite the exhaustion evident in every line of her body. "Plasma damage to the primary systems," she said, her voice carrying the melodic accent of her people. "The targeting array is completely fried, and I think the power coupling took a direct hit." Jake nodded, pulling on his work gloves. "I'll need you to remove the chest plate so I can get a better look at the internal systems. There's a privacy screen over there if you need it." "No need," she said, reaching for the release catches with practiced efficiency. Modesty is a luxury warriors can't afford. As she worked to remove the damaged armor, Jake found himself studying her profile. Valkyrie were known throughout the sector for their martial prowess, but the woman before him seemed to carry a weight that went beyond simple battle fatigue. Her elongated ears drooped slightly, and there was something in her posture that spoke of more than just physical wounds. "Name's Jake," he said, taking the chest plate from her and setting it on his work table. "Jake Morrison." "And you are?" "Zara Kethvar," she replied, settling onto the bench he'd indicated. "Former Sergeant, 3rd Valkyrie Strike Battalion." "Former?" Jake asked, running his scanner over the damaged armor. The readings made him whistle low under his breath. This took some serious punishment. "What did you run into out there?" Zara's hands clenched in her lap, and Jake noticed the way her ears flattened against her skull. "Pirates. They had better intel than we expected." Jake had seen enough combat damage to recognize the signs of an ambush gone wrong. The plasma burns were consistent with close-range firefights, the kind where escape was more important than victory. He'd been in a few of those himself, back when he still believed that fighting was the answer to the galaxy's problems. "Well, the good news is that most of this damage is superficial," he said, focusing on his scanner readings rather than the pain in her voice. "The bad news is that your power coupling is completely shot. I'll need to fabricate a replacement, and that's going to take a few hours." "I can pay," Zara said quickly. "Standard rates, no questions asked." "Questions are extra anyway," Jake replied with a slight smile. "Coffee?" She looked up at him with surprise, as if simple kindness was the last thing she'd expected. Yes. "Thank you." Jake moved to the small kitchenette he'd installed in the corner of the bay, a creature comfort that most of his colleagues thought was unnecessary. As he prepared 2 cups of the real stuff, not the synthetic swill the station dispensers produced, he found himself glancing back at his unexpected client. Zara sat with military precision, her back straight despite her obvious exhaustion. Her hair was woven into the intricate braids that marked her rank, though several strands had escaped to frame her face. The scars on her arms and shoulders were clearly visible without the armor, telling stories of battles fought and survived. "You know," Jake said, returning with the coffee, "in my experience, armor damage this extensive usually comes with a story." "Not that I'm asking," he added quickly, "but sometimes talking helps." Zara accepted the cup with both hands, inhaling the rich aroma before taking a careful sip. "This is real coffee," she said, surprise evident in her voice. "One of the few luxuries I allow myself," Jake replied, settling at his workbench with his own cup. "Picked up the habit during my service days. Nothing quite like the real thing when you're trying to stay awake for 48 hours straight." "You served?" Zara asked, studying him with new interest. "Terran Defense Corps, Combat Engineering Division. 5 years of building things up just so other people could knock them down." Jake activated his fabrication unit, feeding it the specifications for a new power coupling. "Got tired of it eventually. Turns out I prefer fixing things to breaking them. The universe could use more people like you," Zara said quietly, staring into her coffee cup. "Most of the humans I've met lately seem more interested in destruction than creation. Most of the Valkyrie I've met seem pretty fond of destruction themselves," Jake observed, not unkindly. "No offense intended. None taken. It's what we're bred for, after all." There was bitterness in her voice that made Jake look up from his work. The perfect warrior caste. Strong, fast, efficient. Built for war and nothing else. Jake sensed he was treading on dangerous ground, but something in her tone made him continue. "Is that how you see yourself?" Zara was quiet for so long that Jake thought she wasn't going to answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I used to think I was good at it. Being a warrior, I mean. I had the highest combat scores in my class, the best mission success rate in my battalion. I thought that made me valuable. Thought. 3 days ago, my unit was sent to evacuate a human colony under pirate attack. Simple extraction mission, or so we were told." Her hands tightened around a coffee cup. "The pirates were waiting for us. They knew exactly when and where we'd arrive, what our approach vector would be, even which landing zone we'd choose." Jake set down his tools, giving her his full attention. Combat veterans recognized each other, and he could see the weight of command decisions gone wrong in her eyes. "We lost 4 warriors in the first 30 seconds, Zara continued. "The civilians we were supposed to protect were already dead. The whole thing was a trap, designed to eliminate Valkyrie strike teams. And I walked my people right into it." "That wasn't your fault," Jake said firmly. "Bad intel happens. Command decisions happen. Sometimes people die despite everything you do right." "Do they?" Zara looked up at him, her silver-flecked eyes reflecting the bay's harsh lighting. "Or do people die because warriors like me make the wrong choices at the wrong moments?" Jake had heard this conversation before, had it with himself in the mirror more times than he cared to count. "In my experience, the people who ask themselves that question are usually the ones who didn't make the wrong choice." The fabrication unit chimed completion, and Jake retrieved the new power coupling, turning it over in his hands to check the specifications. "This should get your armor back to full functionality. Want to tell me what you're planning to do with it once it's fixed?" Zara watched Jake's hands as he worked, noting the careful precision with which he handled each component of her armor. His fingers moved with the kind of practiced confidence that came from years of experience, and she found herself oddly comforted by the methodical way he approached each repair. "I don't know," she said finally, answering his question about her plans. "For the first time in my adult life, I genuinely don't know what comes next." Jake glanced up from the power coupling he was installing. "That's not necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes not knowing is the first step toward figuring out what you actually want instead of what everyone expects you to want." "Easy for you to say," Zara replied, though there was no heat in her words. "Humans have choices. You can be warriors or healers or engineers or artists. Valkyrie are warriors, period. It's not just what we do, it's what we are." "Is it though?" Jake asked, setting down his fusion welder. "I mean, you're sitting here having a philosophical conversation about life choices while drinking coffee. That doesn't sound very warrior-like to me." Despite everything, Zara found herself smiling. You have a point. Though I should mention that this coffee is excellent. Where did you learn to brew it properly? Trial and error, mostly. Plus a few tips from a Centauri trader who took pity on my early attempts. Jake returned her smile, and Zara noticed how it transformed his entire face. She told me that coffee is like armor repair, it requires patience, attention to detail, and the wisdom to know when to stop tinkering. Wise advice. Though I have to ask, do you always psychoanalyze your clients while fixing their gear? Only the ones who look like they might benefit from it, Jake said, running a diagnostic on the repaired power coupling. Besides, you haven't tried to kill me yet, which puts you ahead of about 30% of my clientele. The night is young, Zara deadpanned, then laughed at Jake's startled expression. Relax, human. Valkyrie humor is apparently an acquired taste. I'm still acquiring it, Jake admitted. Though I have to say, you're not what I expected when I heard Valkyrie warrior walk into my bay. What did you expect? Jake considered this, his hands never pausing in their work. Honestly? Someone angrier. More. I don't know, intimidating. The reputation your people have built suggests that Valkyrie warriors are basically unstoppable forces of nature with anger management issues. We can be, Zara said quietly. When the situation calls for it. But we're also trained to adapt to our environment. Right now, I'm not in a combat situation, so there's no need for the intimidating warrior persona. So this is the real you. The question caught Zara off guard. She'd spent so many years being what others expected her to be that she wasn't entirely sure she remembered what the real her looked like. I think so. Maybe. It's been a while since I've had the opportunity to find out. Jake nodded as if this made perfect sense. I get that. When I was still active duty, I felt like I was wearing a uniform even when I was out of uniform, if that makes sense. It took months of civilian life before I remembered that I actually enjoyed things like books and music and terrible holodrama shows. You watch holodramas? Zara asked, genuinely surprised. The worse, the better. There's something deeply satisfying about watching problems that can be solved in exactly 60 minutes with commercial breaks. Jake held up a repaired armor segment, examining it in the light. What about you? Any guilty pleasures that don't involve combat? Zara hesitated, then decided that honesty had worked well so far. I collect pressed flowers. From different worlds, different ecosystems. I have over 300 specimens from 47 different planets. Jake's hand stilled on the armor piece. That's, actually really beautiful. Do you have them with you? A few. I always carry a small collection in my personal kit. Would you? She trailed off, suddenly self-conscious. Never mind, it's silly. I'd love to see them, Jake said firmly. If you'd like to show them, that is. Zara retrieved her pack from beside the bench, pulling out a slim case that looked incongruously delicate against her warrior's gear. She opened it to reveal dozens of carefully preserved flowers, each one labeled with precise handwriting that noted the planet of origin and collection date. This one is from Kepler Prime, she said, pointing to a silver blossom that seemed to shimmer even in death. They only bloom during solar storms, when the electromagnetic fields are strongest. And this one, she indicated a tiny blue flower that looked like captured starlight, grows in the ice caves of Titan 7. The miners there consider them good luck. Jake leaned closer, studying the collection with genuine interest. These are incredible. The preservation work is museum quality. How long have you been collecting them? Since I was a child. My mother started the collection, actually. She was a warrior too, but she always said that remembering beauty was just as important as protecting it. Zara's voice grew soft. She died when I was 12. Combat mission gone wrong. I'm sorry, Jake said simply. It's the way of things. But I kept the collection because, because it reminded me that there were things worth fighting for beyond duty and honor. Things that existed just to be beautiful. Jake looked up from the flowers to meet her eyes. Is that why you joined the military? To protect beautiful things? Partly. And partly because it was expected. Valkyrie children are tested early for combat aptitude. Those who show promise are tracked into military training. Those who don't. She shrugged. Let's just say there aren't many career alternatives for my people. That seems limiting. It is. But it's also safe, in a way. When your path is chosen for you, you never have to wonder if you're making the right decisions. Zara closed the flower case carefully. Of course, that safety is an illusion. As I learned 3 days ago. Jake was quiet for a moment, considering her words. You know, in my experience, the right decision and the safe decision are rarely the same thing. Meaning? Meaning maybe this is your chance to make some choices that aren't safe. See where they lead. He gestured around the repair bay. Like sitting here talking to a strange human instead of finding the nearest military recruiter. Zara felt something flutter in her chest, an emotion she couldn't quite identify. Is that what you did? Made unsafe choices? Every day, Jake said, grinning. Starting with the decision to fix armor for a living instead of wearing it. My family still thinks I've lost my mind. Have you? Probably. But I'm happier than I've ever been, so if this is insanity, I recommend it highly. The diagnostic unit chimed, indicating that the power coupling replacement was complete. Jake held up the repaired chest plate, its surface now unmarked by battle damage. Good as new, he announced. Better, actually. I upgraded a few of the power distribution circuits while I was at it. You should see improved efficiency in your targeting systems. Zara accepted the armor piece, running her fingers over the smooth surface. Thank you. This is excellent work. My pleasure. Though I have to admit, I'm curious about something. What's that? Jake met her eyes, his expression serious. What are you going to do now? With the armor fixed, I mean. It was the question Zara had been avoiding, the one that had no easy answer. She could seek out another military unit, try to rebuild her career. She could return to Valkyrie space and accept whatever assignment the High Command deemed appropriate for a warrior with a failed mission on her record. Or she could do something entirely different, something that 3 days ago would have been unthinkable. I don't know, she said honestly. For the first time in my life, I genuinely don't know. Want some advice from someone who's been there? Zara nodded. Don't decide tonight. Give yourself time to figure out what you want instead of what you think you should want. The galaxy will still be here tomorrow. As Zara began to put her armor back on, she found herself hoping that Jake would still be here tomorrow too. 3 hours had passed since Jake had completed the basic armor repairs, but somehow neither of them had moved to end their conversation. What had started as a routine maintenance job had evolved into something neither of them had expected, and Jake found himself inventing additional problems to solve just to keep Zara in his workshop a little longer. The targeting computer is recalibrating, he said, which was technically true, though the process had finished 20 minutes ago. These older Valkyrie systems can be finicky after major repairs. Zara raised an eyebrow, a gesture that Jake was beginning to find dangerously attractive. Finicky. My armor is barely 3 years old. Hardly ancient by military standards. Everything's relative, Jake said, tinkering with a perfectly functional circuit board. Besides, I want to make sure the power distribution is balanced correctly. Wouldn't want you to have a system failure in the middle of a firefight. Is that your professional opinion, or are you just trying to keep me here longer? The directness of the question caught Jake off guard, and he felt heat rise in his cheeks. Would it be terrible if it was both? Zara's expression softened. No. It wouldn't be terrible at all. They looked at each other across the workbench, the air between them charged with possibilities neither seemed willing to voice. Jake was the first to break the silence. "Can I ask you something personal?" "More personal than my collection of pressed flowers." "Different kind of personal." Jake set down his tools, giving her his full attention. "Earlier, when you were talking about what Valkyrie are bred for, you sounded like you don't think much of yourself. Why is that?" Zara's ears flattened slightly against her skull, a tell that Jake was beginning to recognize as a sign of discomfort. "It's complicated. I've got time." She was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing patterns on the workbench surface. Valkyrie culture values strength above almost everything else. Physical strength, mental toughness, combat effectiveness. But there's another expectation, one that's never spoken about directly. Which is, we're expected to be appealing to potential allies. Diplomatic assets as well as military ones. Zara's voice grew quiet. The most successful Valkyrie warriors are the ones who can fight and look good doing it. It's not enough to be deadly, you have to be decorative too. Jake frowned. That sounds like an impossible standard. It is. And I've never been good at the decorative part. Zara gestured to her face, her scarred arms, her practical hairstyle. I'm not beautiful like human women. I don't have that effortless grace that makes diplomacy easier. I'm just, functional. Functional, Jake repeated, his voice flat. Yes. A tool. A weapon that walks and talks and occasionally collects flowers. There was pain in her voice that made Jake's chest ache. That's what I was thinking about when my unit walked into that ambush. How I was going to explain to command that I'd failed not just as a warrior, but as a representative of my people. Jake stood up from his workbench, moving around to where Zara sat. Without asking permission, he knelt in front of her, bringing himself to her eye level. Look at me, he said softly. Zara raised her eyes to meet his, and Jake saw vulnerability there that she'd been hiding behind military discipline and self-deprecation. You want to know what I see when I look at you? He asked. She nodded, not trusting her voice. I see someone who's survived battles that would break most people. Someone who carries pressed flowers as a reminder that beauty exists in the universe. Someone who feels responsible for deaths that weren't her fault because she cares too much to shrug off the weight of command. Jake reached out, hesitating just short of touching her face. I see someone who thinks she's just functional, when actually she's extraordinary. Jake, Zara whispered, leaning slightly into his almost touch. I'm not finished, he said, his voice rough with emotion. You want to know about human women? Most of them have never held a dying comrade, never made split-second decisions that determine who lives and who dies, never carried the responsibility for other people's lives. They're beautiful, sure, but it's a soft kind of beauty. Safe beauty. His hand finally made contact with her cheek, his thumb tracing the line of a scar that ran from her temple to her jaw. Your beauty is different. It's earned. Every scar, every line of exhaustion, every moment of doubt you've overcome. It's the beauty of someone who's seen the worst the universe has to offer and chose to keep fighting anyway. Zara's eyes filled with tears she'd been holding back for 3 days. I got my people killed, Jake. You led them into a trap that someone else set. That's not the same thing. Isn't it? No, Jake said firmly. It's not. And the fact that you're here, questioning every decision, feeling responsible for things beyond your control, proves that you're exactly the kind of leader people should follow. Before Zara could respond, the bay doors hissed open, and a familiar figure strode into the workspace. Colonel Thex Mordan, Zara's former commanding officer, moved with the predatory grace that marked high-ranking Valkyrie warriors. His ceremonial armor gleamed under the bay's lights, and his presence immediately filled the space with military authority. Sergeant Kethvar, he said, his voice carrying the tone of someone accustomed to instant obedience. I've been looking for you. Jake stood quickly, placing himself between Zara and the newcomer. Repair bays closed to unauthorized personnel. Thexa's eyes flicked to Jake with mild interest before dismissing him entirely. I'm Colonel Thex Mordan, 3rd Valkyrie Strike Command. I have business with my former subordinate. Former? Jake asked, looking back at Zara. Zara had gone rigid, her military bearing reasserting itself automatically. Colonel. I didn't expect to see you here. I came as soon as I heard you'd survived the ambush, Thex said, his tone warming slightly. Command has reviewed the mission reports, Sergeant. The intelligence failure wasn't your fault. 18 people died under my command, sir. 18 people died because pirates had inside information about our operations. The investigation is ongoing, but initial findings suggest a security breach at the highest levels. Thex moved closer, his expression intense. Which is why I need you back, Zara. I'm forming a new unit, hand-picked operatives for deep reconnaissance missions. Your experience with betrayal makes you valuable, not expendable. Jake felt something cold settle in his stomach. She's not interested. Thexa's attention snapped to him. I wasn't addressing you, human. Maybe not, but you're talking about her like she's equipment to be requisitioned instead of a person who gets to make her own choices. Jake, Zara said quietly, standing up. It's all right. No, it's not, Jake replied, not backing down despite the barely contained menace radiating from the Valkyrie colonel. You just spent the last 4 hours telling me how tired you are of being treated like a weapon instead of a person. Don't let him drag you back into that. Thexa's hand moved to the hilt of his ceremonial blade. Human, you're interfering in military affairs that don't concern you. Everything about Zara concerns me, Jake said, the words out before he could stop them. The silence that followed was deafening. Zara stared at Jake with wide eyes, while Thexa's expression shifted from annoyance to calculation. I see, the colonel said slowly. Sergeant, is this human speaking for you? Zara looked between the two men, her mind racing. On one side stood her past, her duty, the expectations of her people and the chance to redeem herself in the eyes of Valkyrie Command. On the other stood a future she'd never considered, represented by a gentle human who saw beauty in her scars and strength in her doubts. Give me until tomorrow, she said finally. To decide. Thex nodded curtly. Very well. But Zara, remember who you are. Remember what you were born to do. After he left, Jake and Zara stood in the sudden quiet of the repair bay, both of them acutely aware that everything had changed in the space of a few spoken words. So, Zara said eventually. Everything about me concerns you. Jake rubbed the back of his neck, embarrassed. That came out stronger than I intended. Did it? Or did it come out exactly as you meant it? Jake met her eyes, seeing his own uncertainty reflected there. I don't know. But I meant what I said about not letting him treat you like equipment. And if I choose to go with him? If I decide that duty is more important than whatever this is between us? Jake was quiet for a long moment, considering his words carefully. Then I'll fix your armor one more time and wish you luck. But I'll also spend the rest of my life wondering what might have happened if you'd stayed. Zara stepped closer to him, close enough that he could see the flecks of gold in her silver eyes. What do you think might happen if I stayed? I think, Jake said softly, we might figure out what comes after the part where the functional warrior and the broken engineer meet in a repair bay at 3 in the morning. And what comes after that? I have no idea, Jake admitted. But I'd like to find out. Dawn's cycle brought artificial sunlight filtering through the observation deck windows, casting long shadows across the deck plating where Jake sat with 2 cups of coffee growing cold in his hands. He'd been there for an hour, staring out at the stars and trying not to think about Zara's decision. Somewhere on the station, she was weighing duty against possibility, the familiar against the unknown. You look like someone who's contemplating the fundamental meaninglessness of existence, a familiar voice said behind him. Jake turned to find Zara approaching, still wearing her repaired armor but moving with less of the rigid military bearing he'd first noticed. Her face was unreadable, giving no hint of the choice she'd made. "Just thinking," Jake said, offering her one of the coffee cups. "About paths not taken and roads that fork in unexpected directions." "Poetic," Zara observed, settling beside him on the bench. "Also accurate. I've been doing quite a bit of thinking myself." They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching supply ships dock and depart through the massive transparent steel windows. Jake found himself memorizing the details of her profile, the way the artificial sunlight caught the blue undertones in her skin and made her braids gleam like polished metal. "I spoke with Colonel Mordan this morning," Zara said finally. Jake's stomach clenched, but he kept his voice steady. "And I turned down his offer." Jake felt relief flood through him so suddenly that his hands shook. "You did?" "I did. But not for the reasons you might think." Zara turned to face him fully, her expression serious. "I didn't turn it down because of you, Jake, though what you said last night meant more to me than you know. I turned it down because I realized I was making the same mistake I've been making my entire adult life. Which was letting other people define who I am and what I'm worth." She set down her coffee cup, her hands clasping together in her lap. "My whole life, I've been trying to be the perfect Valkyrie warrior. Strong enough, fast enough, pretty enough, successful enough. And every time I fell short of that impossible standard, I told myself I just needed to try harder." Jake waited, sensing she had more to say. "But last night, when you looked at me and saw something beautiful, something worthwhile, it wasn't because I met some external standard. It was because you saw me, not the role I was trying to fill." Zara's voice grew stronger. "And I realized that I've never given myself permission to just be me, without the armor and the rank and the expectations. So what are you going to do?" Zara smiled, and Jake realized it was the first time he'd seen her look truly happy. "Colonel Mordan wasn't pleased with my decision, but he did make me a counteroffer. There's a new training facility being built on Kepler Station, about 6 hours from here by shuttle. They need experienced instructors to train the next generation of Valkyrie warriors. That sounds perfect for you. It gets better. The position comes with regular leave time, opportunities for continuing education, and something I've never had before, a life outside the military." Her smile widened. "I could keep my flower collection. Maybe even expand it." Jake felt his heart skip. "So you're staying in the sector?" "I'm staying in the sector. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" "What do you mean?" Zara stood up, extending her hand to him. "I mean, Jake Morrison, that I would very much like to find out what comes after the part where the functional warrior and the broken engineer meet in a repair bay at 3 in the morning." Jake took her hand, letting her pull him to his feet. "For the record, you're not functional. You're extraordinary. And I'm not broken, just reassembled in a more interesting configuration. Is that your professional opinion?" "That's my personal opinion. My professional opinion is that your armor could use some regular maintenance, and I happen to know an excellent technician who makes great coffee." Zara laughed, the sound bright and genuine. "Are you offering to be my personal armor technician?" "Among other things," Jake said, stepping closer to her. "If you're interested." "I'm very interested. Though I should warn you, I have no idea how to do this. The whole normal relationship thing, I mean. My experience with romance is limited to tactical manuals and statistical analysis of compatible genetic markers. Well, my experience with interspecies relationships is limited to holodramas and one disastrous date with a Centauri trader who turned out to be married to 3 other people." Jake grinned. "So we'll figure it out together." "Together," Zara repeated, as if testing the word. "I like the sound of that." They stood close together in the observation deck, surrounded by the gentle hum of the station's life support systems and the distant sounds of a galaxy going about its business. Through the windows, ships continued their endless dance of arrival and departure, carrying cargo and passengers and dreams across the vast distances between stars. "Jake," Zara said softly, her silver eyes reflecting the starlight. "Yeah. Earlier, when I said I wasn't beautiful like human women, you never actually disagreed with me." Jake cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs tracing the elegant lines of her cheekbones. "That's because you're not beautiful like human women. You're beautiful like Zara Kethvar. Like someone who's fought battles and collected flowers and survived heartbreak and chose hope anyway. You're beautiful like someone who doesn't need to be anything other than exactly who she is." "And who am I?" "You're the woman who walked into my repair bay and changed everything," Jake said, leaning his forehead against hers. "You're the warrior who chose peace, the soldier who collects pressed flowers, the person who taught me that some things are worth fighting for and some things are worth surrendering to." "What am I surrendering to?" "Same thing I am," Jake whispered. "The possibility that two people from different worlds might actually be able to build something beautiful together." Zara closed the distance between them, her lips meeting his in a kiss that tasted like coffee and starlight and new beginnings. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard, and Jake realized that his hands were tangled in her braids while hers gripped the front of his work shirt. "So," Zara said, her voice slightly unsteady, "what happens now?" "Now I help you get settled in your new quarters, we figure out shuttle schedules between here and Kepler Station, and I start learning everything I can about Valkyrie culture so I don't accidentally insult your family when I eventually meet them." "You want to meet my family?" "Eventually. If you want me to." Jake grinned. "Though I should probably practice my diplomatic skills first. I have a feeling they're going to be less impressed by my coffee-making abilities than you are." "They'll love you," Zara said confidently. "Anyone who can make me laugh the way you do has my family's automatic approval. I make you laugh. Constantly. Even when you're being serious, especially when you're being serious." She kissed him again, quick and sweet. "It's one of the many things I find beautiful about you." As they walked back through the station corridors toward the residential sections, Jake realized that his life had just taken a turn he never could have anticipated. A week ago, he'd been a solitary repair technician with a quiet life and simple routines. Now he was planning a future with a warrior from another world, someone who challenged every assumption he'd made about what was possible. "Jake," Zara said as they reached the lift that would take them to the temporary quarters she'd rented. "Yeah. Thank you." "For what?" "For seeing me when I couldn't see myself. For making me remember that there's more to life than duty and guilt and trying to live up to other people's expectations." She squeezed his hand. "For giving me permission to be happy." "You don't need permission for that," Jake said softly. "But you're welcome anyway." The lift doors opened with a soft chime, and they stepped inside together, hands intertwined, ready to begin writing the next chapter of a story that had started with damaged armor and evolved into something neither of them had dared to dream. Outside the station's windows, the stars continued their eternal dance, but for the first time in years, neither Jake nor Zara felt small in the face of that vast emptiness. They had found something worth holding on to in each other, something that made the universe feel less empty and more full of possibilities. As the lift carried them toward whatever came next, Zara leaned